The Liberal Minister of Natural Resources goes before committee and gets completely trounced. Welcome to Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. MP Wilkinson, the Liberal Minister for Natural Resources, has to appear before the Natural Resources Committee to try and get some money pushed through because they refuse to surrender the unredacted documents and as such can't get their budget passed. Honestly, Canadians are probably better off because of that, if I'm truthful. Unfortunately for him, MP Shannon Stubbs was in the room and she was ready to talk to him. And they got 3 rounds in, like they got a 6-minute, a 5-minute, and a 3 minutes each, like 3 minutes for the Liberals and the Conservatives. And at the very beginning, the Liberals tried to jump all over MP Stubbs. You know, as I say at the beginning, because she just completely wipes the floor with them. By the time she gets through the 3rd round, the guy is basically crying into his sleeve. And he can't even, he's so demure and meek by the, by the end of it. It's really entertaining to watch. However, it opens up with one, like I'm going to show you this one, like 10-second clip of how MP Wilkinson starts his 5 minutes, right? And for those of you that might not be aware, when the witnesses show up, they get to have 5 minutes to talk about whatever their position happens to be, depending on who they are. And of course, all of the ministers always do the same thing. They always try to stump and make it look like it's a big political move. So, but there was something in there that I found to be extremely shocking, and I wanted you all to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable colleagues, it is a pleasure to be with you today to speak to Supplementary Estimates B. Climate change is altering our world's natural environment in a myriad of harmful ways. This means increasingly severe and frequent weather events, but it also means more expensive groceries, higher local taxes, and higher insurance premiums for Canadians.
You have got to be kidding me. This is how far down that they will go into the mud, these Liberals. Now you want to blame grocery prices on climate change, not on your policies. Now you want to blame insurance premiums going through the roof, not on the fact that you defunded the police and have a massive car theft going on all the time and you're telling people to don't even try to defend themselves. No, it's climate change. Taxes are not up because we're desperate to pay for all of the Liberal policies and all of the things that they keep promising everybody, all of the money that the checks they keep writing. No, taxes are up because of climate change. Come on, man. Knock it off. So without further ado, I'm just going to let you start watching MP Stubbs tear this guy to ribbons. Not just him, the entire room. I mean, it is excellent.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister and officials, for being here. Minister, it just strikes me, everything that you just talked about, it seems to suggest that you yourself haven't been in power for 9 years. And I guess the obvious question for most Canadians would be, well, how do you imagine that any of us are supposed to believe that any of those things are priorities for you when after 9 years you haven't got any of it done? And if you're so confident, now you want to fight the Conservatives, you want to fight the NDP, you want to fight whoever, then just call a carbon tax election and let Canadians actually make this decision for once and for all. But I just have a general question to start with you. If you're a seller of a product, do you believe that having more customers is better than having one?
Honourable member, I would say we have been in power for 9 years. We've made enormous progress. The Smart Renewables Program, for example, actually has 71 different projects that have actually generated 2,700 megawatts of power. But what Canadians want to understand is why you are obstructing the work of Parliament, why Parliament is wasting millions of dollars doing almost nothing every day because the Conservatives simply obstruct everything that's happening.
Mr. Wilkinson.
So what are we, a minute in? And we've got the Liberal ignoring the question, changing the subject, talking about something. The Liberals are so upset about the filibuster that the Conservatives are doing. They're so upset about it. And it is excellent to watch them be upset about it, but refuse to admit that they're upset about it. Every minister that comes into committee is just throwing tantrum after tantrum after. It's excellent to watch. Now they did a point of order because MP Stubbs is not one to brook foolishness, and she just talked right over him.
We have a point of order. I'll ask you to hold 1 second. Go ahead on a point of order, Mr. Bruson.
I'm just asking, the minister was providing an answer and Ms. Stubbs kept on interrupting. It makes it really hard to actually hear the answer.
So, Mr. Bruson, thank you for a point of order, and I'm glad we've able to raise this right off the top because we want to make sure that the individuals asking the questions ask the questions, and the minister has appropriate time to provide an answer. And I would hope that members do not interrupt the individual asking the question, but also the minister who's responding to the question asked. So if you can give him an appropriate amount of time to do so, I think that would be greatly appreciated, and we'll have a smooth meeting accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Bruson, on a point of order, and I am... do you have a point of order, Mr. Falk?
Yes, on a related point of order, I think when the minister's asked a succinct question, he should give a succinct answer.
So, Mr. Falk, thank you for your point of order. I'd like to acknowledge that he was just getting into giving an answer before he was cut off. So I want to make sure that we have the ability to ask and answer. I will go back to you, Ms. Stubbs.
Sorry, point of order.
Sorry, we have a point of order from Mr. Angus.
I don't want to give anybody advice with my old gray hair, but my Conservative colleagues keep ruining their clips by doing points of order. I'd say let's just carry on.
I don't like that MP Chanel or Chappelle or whatever. I don't like the chair of this committee. He was arrested for tearing down campaign posters for his opponent. He's clearly not impartial, right? He's trying to say, oh, no, he was trying to give it. We all heard the answer that he gave. It was nowhere near the question, not even close to the question. But of course, this guy, he can't be impartial, right? But don't worry. MP Stubbs is not so easily pushed over, it seems. So you've heard them take a run at her, right? We are 2 minutes in, and we've had static from the MP. We've had static from the minister. We've had static from the NDP. And we even have the chair trying to sway it over to his side. So it's basically the Conservatives against them all.
Minister, do you believe it's better to have more customers than one? Minister, do you believe it's better to have more customers than one?
It's exactly the reason why we actually built the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which you folks couldn't actually get built, is to ensure that we actually had access to Tidewater to be able to actually sell our products to other markets.
So after 9 years, what actually happened is in the first 2 years of your government, you killed the two private sector proposed dedicated export pipelines. One to be able to export to Asia, one to the East Coast, which would have secured energy self-sufficiency for Canadians and secure export markets in Europe. In fact, TMX now has only just started operating, and within 5 years, Canada will be out of pipeline capacity altogether. It is because of your policies that Canada now, in 2023, is still dependent on the U.S. as a number one customer for oil and gas, while the U.S. since 2015, in every Democrat, then Republican, then Democrat, then Republican administration, has turned the United States from a net importer of oil into a net exporter, Canada's biggest competitor, while because of your anti-development policies, they are still Canada's biggest customer. How can you be proud of a track record that helps create jobs and build pipelines, sends money and investment into the United States while leaving Canadians broke, poor, and jobless?
Well, I would say it's a sad state of affairs when a representative of a political party that actually couldn't get anything built in this country is actually making that kind of an argument. At the end of the day, the Conservative Party gutted environmental protection such that nothing could actually get built in this country. They lost social license. They lost the ability to work with Indigenous peoples. It was this government, through the work that we did very proactively, particularly on the Indigenous side, that actually managed to get the Trans Mountain Pipeline built, but also major projects across this country.
That answer was pretty weak, to try and say that they lost social license because they lost the election. To ignore the fact that you killed two international pipelines, to ignore the whole question and just try to throw out some kind of comment. The fact that you can't answer the question is a strong indicator that she's right and you're wrong, or not wrong so much as she's correct and you've got no point to make. Because if you had a point, you would probably say it. Now, I know in your mind you think that you might be scoring some points, but from where I'm sitting, that was just weak. There was nothing to it, no teeth in it at all. And all you really did was insult the person who was correct in the room. So is that the level that you will go to? Is that how far you were willing to go to note that, you know, you sent all this money and all of this industry down into the United States of America? You destroyed 2 pipelines going east and west so that we could send our product to Asia and send our product to Europe. And all you can say is, well, you lost social license.
Except you killed the Northern Gateway Pipeline, of which every single Indigenous
most folks
community supported and had mutual benefit agreements that you took all away from them when the Prime Minister vetoed it without any consultation. Can you at least by now answer the question, how many oil and gas jobs will your one of its kind in the world production cap kill?
It's going to create tens of thousands of jobs in Alberta when you actually are going to see large-scale CCUS projects that are going to be built in Alberta, that are going to be operated in Alberta, methane reduction technologies that have already driven significant job growth in Alberta. You are going to see significant job creation associated with the path. And that is exactly why you hear from workers that they actually think this is a good thing. Rather than letting companies that are making enormous profits simply distributed back to shareholders,
Minister,
this is actually going to ensure they invested in Canada.
You're talking about jobs in the future. 300,000 Canadians since 2015 have already lost their oil and gas jobs because of your policies. The Conference Board of Canada, S&P Global, and Deloitte says your first of its kind in the world, not a cause for celebration, but instead a cause for caution, says your cap will kill between 100 to 150,000 jobs over the next 15 years. So I guess the question is simple then. Do you believe the Conference Board of Canada, S&P Global, Deloitte, the Canadian Chambers of Commerce, and all of the other experts and economists who have come out to say your oil and gas cap, exactly as you intended to do, will kill hundreds of thousands of jobs? Do you think they're wrong?
I do, actually. They were basing their analysis, first of all, on a regulation that didn't even exist. Second of all, one of the assumptions they made was that oil and gas companies would do nothing to reduce their emissions. The only person who in this room, or the only people in this room who actually think that's a reasonable thing to say, are the climate deniers who maybe sit on the Conservative benches.
Now MP Wilkins is smarter than a whole room full of bankers. I'm sure he's qualified for that. I think, by the way, that his answer was, you know, she lays out all of these people whose really their only job is to analyze where they can make more money. Like that's all they, that's what they do, right? You see the commercials where they got the pie charts and the graphs and stuff like that, but that's literally what these guys do. Like that's their job. You know, they analyze things and they look at and they project and they do some math. MP Wilkins, on the other hand, his comeback was, oh, maybe you got climate deniers and you didn't base it on the right model. Like in his mind, they just looked at one, because I've seen these kind of models play out. Like I've been in the room, and to think that the guy would only look at one factor and then submit that in to the shareholders and to the investors. They ran 7 of them while they were having supper. You know what I mean? Like this guy. Oh, climate deniers. See how they just really want their little sound bites, right? They just want their little say so they can say climate denier. They get really, they got no strength in their argument. Nothing to give back. And so all they do is revert to like you were on the playground at school. Name calling and hair pulling is all they really have. So now we're coming to the end of the round, which is kind of important when you look at the weakness of his answer compared to her question.
Minister, you mentioned Indigenous opportunities and jobs, and I certainly have been an advocate over the past 10 years since I've been elected for job opportunities and economic prosperity for Indigenous people, reconciling action so they can move from surviving poverty to thriving in prosperity for the benefit of the entire country. Do you know how many Indigenous people are employed in Canada's oil and gas sector?
There are many, as there are in Canada's mining sector, and I would say that's an extremely good thing. But I would say, once again, we're here because the blockage in Parliament to be able to get the SUPs be approved means that you're actually looking to kill the Indigenous Advisory Committee, something that has been enormously important for the oil and gas sector, and that's something you should reflect on, and so should your leader.
Minister, up to almost 10% of the oil and gas sector jobs are filled by Indigenous people. Those are the people most at risk
Ms.
of your
Stubbs,
anti-energy policies.
Time's up. You'll have to continue that line of questioning in the next round.
So she asks him about the employment rates of certain demographics in this country, and he tries to make it all about the advisory committee and how Pierre Poilievre should be thinking about that. Like, do you see how she asked him a very succinct and very direct question, and he tried to make it all about how everything is going to be canceled under the Conservatives and you should be terrified? To the dread of MP Wilkinson, MP Stubbs gets the 5-minute round, right? Now we're at the 5-minute. And he doesn't have anywhere near the bluster in this round. And she just picks up right where she left off without skipping a beat. It's fun.
As you know, Indigenous people make up about 4% of the national workforce, but 8% of the energy sector. Indigenous people make 3 times more in the oil and gas sector than they do in other sectors. Indigenous women in particular make very much more than others in other sectors. There are lower unemployment among Indigenous people in the oil and gas sector than the rest of the economy. And so I just wonder, how is it that knowing that the oil and gas cap, because every expert says so, will kill hundreds of thousands of Canadian oil and gas jobs, how can you possibly justify bringing through policies that will kill the jobs, the livelihoods, and the future aspirations of those people you always say you care about most?
Well, I mean, Ms. Stubbs, that's just factually untrue. And in fact, the way in which the oil and gas cap is defined is we expect to see a 16% increase in production, not a decrease in production, an increase in employment, not a decrease in employment. And we've brought forward mechanisms like the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program, which is sector agnostic, to ensure that Indigenous people can participate not just as workers in the sector, but as owners in the sector. That is absolutely a fundamental part of what we are working to do.
Well, there you have it. The Liberal government is putting a cap on a thing, making it have a limit so that it will grow. And if for whatever reason a First Nations individual loses their job because of this cap, but they're not going to lose their job, jobs are going to grow. However, for some reason, even though jobs are going to grow, they've added in this new provision where you can borrow money from the federal government to start a business. We don't care what business it is, because somehow you're going to buy an oil rig or something, or you're just going to buy your own pipeline with this loan. Like, they're going to lend you $30 million so you can run a pipeline over to British Columbia or something. Am I the only one who hears the contrast in his own words? It's just his own words, right? On the one hand, it's going to make the cap, the reduction, the limiting of it is going to make it grow, which is a bit weird in my mind right out of the gate. But if it doesn't make it grow, and if the First Nations do lose their jobs, we will lend them a low interest loan that they can start a business on their own. The Liberals really seem to have a very bizarre relationship with mathematics and logic. Is it just me? You let me know in the comments.
But let's talk about LNG, because of course it's you and your government who seem to be the only people in the world who think there's no business case for Canadian LNG. How many countries, Minister, have asked for LNG from Canada?
First of all, I would say it's the height of hypocrisy for a member of a party that actually could never get a pipeline to Tidewater built to actually be saying that we're somehow at fault for the fact that there's actually still a significant amount of oil going to the United States. We are the first government that actually was able to get a pipeline built, and that's because we respect the environment and we respect Indigenous peoples, unlike the Harper Conservative governments, which did not respect either.
Mr. Wilkinson, I'm asking you to hold there. Colleagues, we need to have one individual speaking at a time, the individual asking the question, and the minister to have an opportunity to answer the question, because it makes it very difficult for our interpreters to interpret when we have multiple microphones on and multiple folks speaking. So please feel free to ask your question, but please provide the minister enough time to provide a response.
Great. The question was the question was how many countries have asked Canada for LNG?
Crickets. Even Chahal there had to look over at the Liberals and go, why didn't you try to interrupt? Why did I have to be the one to interrupt this this interaction between these two? And again, she asked him a straightforward question. He tries to make it all about getting the pipeline built that we all know the Liberals destroyed, and then they weren't going to do it, and it was going to be built by private industry, and then they had it built for 30 times what the private industry was going to do it for, or 5 times, something like that. Like it was just, it's 35 billion. It was nowhere near that when the company started it. And she's talking about LNG now. He's back to a pipeline, but there's a lot of money. The world is begging for LNG.
There have been 6 LNG projects that have actually proceeded to the decision stage during the 9 years we've been in government. 5 have been approved. One that was rejected by the government of Quebec.
The answer is 7 countries have asked for LNG from Canada. Germany, Poland, Japan, Ukraine, South Korea, Greece, and Latvia. Your Prime Minister, your government said there is no business case. So, in fact, Canada is exporting 0 LNG right now. But in the exact same time that you guys have been in government, the U.S., of course, has skyrocketed ahead to export LNG. Then the Biden administration announced a pause. You still dithered and delayed and roadblocked Canadian LNG out of Canada. Mexico went to race ahead. Now, in addition to the tariffs that Trump is threatening on Canada, he has also said they're going to ramp up exporting LNG again. How on earth, Minister, can you justify your anti-development and anti-energy policy that send $500 billion in businesses and investment from Canada to the United States, creates jobs, builds critical infrastructure, helps export from the United States while landlocking Canada, killing our GDP, doubling housing costs, doubling food bank uses, skyrocketing the costs of all essentials, and killing Canadian jobs?
I mean, it would be nice if you would actually use some facts, Ms. Stubbs. There are 3 LNG projects that are actually in the process of being built right now. One is LNG Canada 1. The second is Woodfibre. The third is Cedar LNG. With respect to the East Coast opportunity, I would suggest that you read the newspaper, because it was Repsol and TC Energy who actually said that there was no economics, because the infrastructure costs of getting that amount of gas to the East Coast actually meant that the price of gas would not be competitive. That was a business decision by businesses.
And you
Thank
killed
you,
Ms.
Stubbs.
All I can say when I watched that last little segment is, not so tough now, are you, MP Wilkinson? Seems you're very quiet at your desk. Oh, I wish you would tell the truth. And then like if you were going to if you're saying to somebody that it should tell the truth, you would follow up with where their corrections are, right? But he followed up with, oh, there's a bunch of LNG projects in the working. Everything with the Liberals is always in the future. It's never right now. It's never already done. It's never any of that. It's always, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Meanwhile, nothing is getting done. Oh, it was a business decision made by businesses. Now all of a sudden he trusts the business decisions, made by the industry. When it's the people telling him that his cap is going to destroy jobs, no, he knows better than that. But when the industry tells him, well, it's going to be expensive to get it over there, there's no way in the world that it would have cost more than it can make. Right? Like there's no way that they would have been losing money on that. That's why they had to kill the pipeline in the first place, because they were willing to send that pipeline over to the LNG transfer terminus that isn't built. But I mean, we could build it. Now the United States, however, has a big one in Boston, an LNG terminus. But the Liberal government doesn't seem to want our country to be making any money. They just want to destroy our economy and make us live like they did 2,000 years ago, where we're all just scraping by to get a subservience while they fly around in private jets, forcing us to eat crickets while they eat steak. And not even in our country, right? Because they'll be surfing down in the Caribbean or whatever. I don't know. I'm really surprised that people voted for this. Like, I can't believe in my mind that people voted for poverty and suppression. As a result of all of the various complaining that the Liberal Party did with their points of orders and whatnot, they ran out of time and they were down to just a few minutes. So for those of you that may not be aware, the Liberal Party and the Conservatives, one is the government and one is the opposition, get an extra 5 minutes at the end. However, at the discretion of the chair, they were cut down to 3 minutes. I'm going to play this one through because just when you think that she couldn't stomp on him anymore, I'm telling you, oh man. I mean, he might as well just go in the corner. Oh man.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks again, Minister. After 9 years and 3 presidents, your government still hasn't reached a softwood lumber agreement with the United States. It's resulted in softwood lumber tariffs on Canada doubling to over 14%. Now there's a possibility it could be a further 11% increase. What do you have to say to the hundreds of workers, particularly in Quebec and BC, but right across the country, who have already lost their jobs?
I would say it's obviously a very difficult and very challenging set of issues. The U.S. administration, Republican or Democrat, have been very, very challenging to deal with on this file for a whole range of different reasons. We continue to look for a negotiated agreement with the Americans, and we will continue to do that. We have put in place measures, including in the last budget, about $350 million to actually support the forest sector, and we're looking at what more we can do. I certainly have met with all of the major companies, and the Minister of International Trade, who leads on this, is also doing that.
It is wild, of course, given the former Conservative government got a softwood lumber deal done within months, and actually, in fact, right before you took over, got an extension done. Now, the committee next door is actually doing a study on softwood lumber. So since you don't seem to have anything to say to the workers who are losing their jobs, let me tell you what they're actually saying. The United Steelworkers says the impact of the last 8 years has been far-reaching, wide, and devastating. Steel, in terms of our sector, steelworkers, 2,500 to 3,000 jobs have been impacted. They say they haven't been feeling that softwood lumber is a priority for your government. Groupe LaBelle says since hearing news on the tariffs, they looked at their client base and what they thought was acceptable to them. And guess what? Just as is the pattern of your government driving money, jobs, and businesses into the United States to the expense of Canadians, they say American clients are 50% of their business. And if things don't work out on the market side, they could lose much of that. 800 workers could be affected by these tariffs for their company, Groupe LaBelle, alone. So what are you actually going to do? And really, what do you have to say to all the Canadians and to our entire country that you have made so vulnerable to the United States?
Oh, where to start? I mean, the ridiculous nature of the questions that you've been posing today, I just have a hard time even beginning to respond to them. But at the end of the day, this is an important issue. It's an important issue for folks who work in the forestry industry. It's an important issue for the companies in the forestry sector.
Minister Wilkinson, a point of order from Mr. Patzer. Mr. Patzer, on a point of order.
Yeah, I think the record shows that Mr. Wilkinson thinks United Steelworkers are a joke, which is crazy.
Mr. Patzer, that's not a point of order. That's a point of, I think, debate, and you do not have the floor to debate right now. Minister, yes, go ahead. Mr.
I think that was an inappropriate use of a point of order, and just to be clear, the record does not show that at all. So let's be clear, that is not what happened.
Thank you,
well, he just started laughing, and so did you guys.
On your point of order. That was not a point of order, and thank you for recognizing it wasn't. I'm going to go to you, Minister Wilkinson. We have like 15, 20 seconds left, so you can finish off your answer to that.
The forestry sector is obviously a very important sector, and there are many communities, certainly many in the province that I come from, of British Columbia, that actually have been suffering because of the softwood lumber issue. As I say, the Government of Canada has put in place a number of programs, including value-added forestry work, to try to actually ensure that we are moving forward, and we are engaging the Americans, and we will continue to work as hard as we possibly can to get a deal with the United States that's a good deal for Canada.
From the United States. Are you still
Minister Wilkinson, and thank you, Ms. Stubbs, for your round of
First of all, we all heard him say ridiculous. We all heard him be condescending and to laugh at her question. We all heard it. Everybody heard it. We all saw the look on his face. And then he remembered the cameras are rolling. And all of a sudden, he tried to wipe the smirk off his face, and everybody tried to jump in. And then at the point of order, he should have turned the clock off. But he let the clock continue to run because they needed to bail him out. Because MP Wilkinson sat down full of bluster and was all smug at the beginning of the first round. By the end of the third round, MP Stubbs had turned him into a little puddle on the ground. I mean, he probably went home and had a hot bath. He took such a beating in that. He probably had to, call up whoever his support staff is and just vent because he's so completely and utterly out of his league. I mean, there was no way in the world he knew the answer to that. All those jobs are going. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's got no control of it. They give these guys these portfolios. They're not qualified. I mean, he talks like he's in elementary school, and it's all about he said, she said, and, who's got the nicer bicycle or something. There's no substance in anything that he has to say. By contrast, MP Stubbs come in, seems to know her stuff, seems to have all of the answers right at her fingertips, and was able to, she appeared to be well-versed on more than one subject. I mean, why would anybody not vote for that kind of competence? Now, I know this one went on a little long, but what are you going to do? MP Stubbs had 14 minutes to herself, and I think that she just trounced MP Wilkinson, who was always so condescending, and it was great to watch. All right, I'm going to wrap here. If you listen this long, I appreciate it. I'll talk to you next time.